that are on social media that are following our friends and family, and we're saying, okay, look, brand company, you may want to reach 1 million eyeballs. So you might just go to 2 people and say, you guys have 500,000 followers each. Let's share 2 posts. That's 1 million in impressions. The 1 million people saw our advertisements. We're saying, let's get 2,000 people that have 500 followers each. Let's reach 1 million impressions, but let's get 2,000 people to share the same message and content. And that idea is what's created from this idea that the most viral content on the internet isn't shared from one person, one message down like a broadcast. It's shared between small groups of people, between 5 to 7 people. And so that's kind of what we saw, what's called the proximity effect. And that's what you guys are talking about when you're saying smaller rooms have a better networking effect. It's because there's a closer proximity of where you're at to those people, physically in this case. But on social media, with our case, it's a smaller number of connections, and those connections are usually your friends and family, so you have a tighter relationship, so you're more influential over those people, so you get more likes and comments. That's what it comes out to. But yeah, responsibility is important.
If you are interested, this concept of what Chris said, it isn't just a short attention span. It's actually this idea of being so engrossed with all of the media. In education, we call that continuous partial attention, and it does actually have a lot of impact on education too. So I thank you for bringing that up. You can see this influence, of course, we're seeing from Caitlin and Emily and Chris, who are all talking about it from an advertising standpoint. It actually trickles down as well, and you'll see this for instance, commercials or films, etc., that influence trickles down into the decisions that the director and the actor are making. So Heath, I was hoping that you might talk a little bit about that.
Sure. It's interesting because as an actor, we aren't generally privy to a lot of those decisions. I mean, you know, I've never had any kind of input from a director or anything that specifically has addressed, like, you know, we need to alter your performance to appeal more to the 18 to 24 market. You know, so it's really interesting because you're right in that as part of that process, you are a part of the marketing or part of the message you're trying to get out. But as a performer, I understand a little more because I've also worked behind the camera and done my own films, things like that. But yeah, as an actor, that's not even something you're usually even thinking about. You're just, you know, micro focusing on your character. What am I doing the best job I can do? And in my Miracle Whip commercial, looking really disappointed that my salad dressing doesn't have Miracle Whip. So I'm sure, and they spend, I'm sure, who knows how much money crafting that commercial specifically to, like you were saying, to go to specific groups and whatnot. And that decision probably went into casting or not casting me in that commercial, and that they're like, you know, maybe this guy in this particular role will appeal to that, or, you know, if I'm the villain or whatever, maybe they want, you know, an age group that they're trying to not vilify the age group, but who's not in the demographic they're trying to appeal to and such. But
do you remember what any of the casting calls said for any of the commercial work you've done? Like what their height and hair color?
Yeah, you know, some of them can be very specific, you know, and they'll be like, you know, male age, they'll give it, it's always age range, and, you know, a lot of times, like a lot of stuff I go up for ends up being kind of like guy next door kind of stuff. And it's really interesting when you sort of see the breakdowns of the things you were sent for, and you're like, I'm getting an insight into how the world perceives me. You know? Apparently I'm seen kind of as guy next door, friendly but not too good looking. You know, that's another one I've been a lot. It's like, you know, they don't want, I can't remember exactly how they worded it, but they worded it kind of like, we don't want somebody ugly, but not too handsome. That's another, I get that one, a lot of that, so I'm there, apparently that guy. But I've also seen, yeah, there's been a lot of controversy over that too, in that I'm sure everybody's seen, like on Facebook, certain things went out about like how casting calls can be really negative, and it'll be like, or I've seen casting calls, you know, for something, wanted, you know, fat ugly guy, and you're just like, you would probably word that in a way that's a little bit less, you know, I mean, do you want to, nobody, yeah, right? I'm like, yay, I got fat, ugly guy.
Accept money for that?
Thank you, I want.
Yeah. So, but then another thing you find is a lot of times you go in there, so I said sometimes they're very specific, sometimes they're not very specific. They're kind of open to anything. And like I remember one commercial in particular, I went up for like a national HEB commercial, and I didn't get it. And then when I watched the commercial, I was like, oh, I wonder, you know, who got it? And it was like a 50-year-old Asian lady, and I was like, I can't feel too bad about that because they went in a completely different direction. So it wasn't like that's a guy that looks almost just like me, but is skinnier and slightly better looking. You know? So sometimes they're really open to anything. I mean, a lot of times, especially in the commercial world, it's not about your talent at all. It's literally like a lottery where an advertising company came up with their commercial. They drew storyboards for the commercial. We want to get a two-shot of this guy and this girl talking and walking in the park. And they've got an image in their head right then. As soon as they've crafted this scene, I see this guy in my head. And if you walk into that room and you look like that guy they saw in their head, you're getting the part. And if you don't look like that guy, then a lot of times you won't get it, and it's out of your control. You can be the best actor in the world. But when they're auditioning, you know, 500 people for, you know, a commercial with no lines or one line or whatever, you're simply, your talent, you're not going to be so that much better than the other 499 guys that we cast you because you were the best at looking disappointed in your potato salad.
Why do they look at 500 people then?
That's a really good question.
If
I've
it doesn't
never
really
understood
matter,
that.
like, I mean, it does matter.
I just was telling them I had an audition this week that I had to tape because I was out of town. So I said, well, you can tape it. And I was like, oh, great. So I taped it at home. It was for a rodeo clown in a commercial. Not the main, but he's like just a little, they're doing like 5 different spots. There was one spot where a cowboy's talking and he brings out his phone and drops it in a water trough. And the rodeo clown he's talking to basically just like listens to him talk and then like reacts to him dropping his phone in the water trough and however you want to react to that. And for that role, they're auditioning hundreds of people, and they wanted us, it was mandatory that we had to actually be in rodeo clown makeup for the audition. Which part of me I understand because like you really do look different in makeup. I mean, I did a film with one of my best friends, but the film I met him on, he was playing a mime. So when I first met him, he was in mime makeup. And then when I saw him without the mime makeup, I was like, that's not what I thought you looked like at all. So I kind of understand it. But on the flip side, I'm with you in it, like, it's a 2-second reaction to somebody dropping a phone. And do you really need me? We got to see you in full clown makeup and made up, and then we need to see 500 guys to see who can most just embody this. There you go. And it's in some ways it can be in that way it can be a very wasteful industry money-wise, and that like a lot of times they want to pay the talent as they call it. I don't like that word, but they refer to actors in film and TV as the talent because nobody else is talented. It's sarcasm, that is, in case that was not clear. But then they'll pay 500 extras to fill an arena for a boxing scene that then you watch that TV show and you can't see a single person in the audience of that boxing scene. And I'm like, wow, you just paid 500 people and then now it's not even there. But I mean, I say this, but I still love what I do, though. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I think to do this kind of job, it's got to be what you love to do. And I was telling him I was having a discussion with he's still an actor, but a very burnt out actor who was going up for this same rodeo clown role. He was like, well, I'm not putting makeup on. And I was like, well then why are you even going to the audition? Because you're basically right off the bat just giving him a big middle finger and going, I don't care if you want me in makeup, I'm not doing it. And he's burnt out, he's got his reasons, but I'm just like, I don't mind it. I find commercials fun. A lot of actors, he's one of those that doesn't want to do commercials anymore. He's burnt out. They treat you like cattle. And I'm like, maybe I'm lucky, or maybe I don't know if maybe this is specific to Austin, but specifically in the Austin and Texas in general, commercials are much more fun, quirky, like 30-second little short films. they're usually like someone comes up with a really funny idea, and they're very rarely just the kind of like,
Or Matthew
what
McConaughey
about
just driving around building it.
yeah.
Driving
Well, there you
around
go.
Austin, and I'm like, good.
And so to me, it's still fun, and I still enjoy what I do. I don't feel that's not something I do because like, well, that's what you got to do to pay the bills. I'm like, I've worked with some great production companies that make funny little 30-second short films called commercials, and got to play some funny characters, and I love it. And did I even remotely touch the point you were looking for?
My take on this, the cattle herding idea, is to specifically get that image that they have in their head. I mean, if there's 500 people coming in the room, surely one of them is going to be similar to that person in your head that represents your lifestyle that you want to portray.
Hopefully. I would say some of the biggest successes I felt in my life were when I got cast despite the fact that I was nothing like what they said they were looking for. And so that was a good victory where they actually were like, well, you were the best actor, so we'll adapt our vision of what we thought we wanted. Those, I guess there's little victories you get, and you're like, yay, I convinced them, I'm good.
I think this next question actually flows from this conversation, so I'll let you keep going with it. In order to represent well the companies, whether they be your own company or your own acting life, etc., you really have to brand yourself. And I was hoping that each of you might talk a little bit about how you've branded yourself to best portray your work.
But that's definitely true. I've always said, if you want to really be a working actor, it's kind of sad for some people because being a good actor is not enough. You have to be a marketer and a promoter and a networker, and especially now more than ever in this day and age, like we were just talking about how social media is huge. And so I have my personal Facebook page, and I have, of course, my Facebook actor musician page. And before I had that page, I was contemplating whether I needed one. So I'm like, well, I've got my Facebook. Do I really need also? Because I tend to also be sort of bad at self-hyping. I feel weird about it, being like, he's an actor. I'm so good. Come hype me or whatever. And so I'd asked some people who were I was like, is there a reason I need the actor page or whatever when I've got my personal page? And the best answer I got for that, which clarified it for me and made me make an actor page, was somebody said to me that okay, well right now I'm not a huge celebrity or whatever, but he's at some point in your career, hopefully if it goes the way you want it to anyway, your fans or whatever will not just be your friends. And so my personal Facebook page is obviously people I usually know and kind of work with on a personal level, and while my actor page, and I'm not huge enough to have a fan base or anything yet, but if I do have the kind of career I want, there will be a time when hopefully people I don't know at all want to follow me or find out what I'm doing or see what project, and that's what the page is for, because anybody can go like my Facebook page. I don't have to approve you as a friend. You can go like the Heath Allen Entertainer page. And that's what clarified it for me, is that concept of at some point your audience is going to be more than just your friends. And that's when you probably want that public page. And so I've struggled over the years, and I'm still refining it. In fact, my girlfriend's talked to me a lot about this, about needing to refine my brand and figure out, what am I posting on my personal versus posting on my actor page versus posting on my Twitter versus my Google Plus versus, and there's so many avenues now that, and a lot of them hook up to each other and you can kind of synchronize. It's a puzzle. That's why there are, I guess, that's what people do, publicists and social media experts and things, to really help you narrow that down and be help you focus. And it's also tough because I'm someone who strives to be a very versatile actor and not get pigeonholed. I don't want to be Heath Allen, quirky comedic actor. I also do dramatic stuff. I played villains, and that's really tough because, at least in my industry specifically, people want to put you in a box. They want to be like, what do you know? You're this guy. Okay, that's who you are. You're that guy. And that's all I want to think about you as, is that guy. And so, yeah, it's tough trying to stay versatile, but also be branded. Because a lot of branding folks will say, focus on what you want to do. And it's easier to market that way. If I want to just market myself as a comedic actor, it would be easier. Because I could really laser focus on those avenues and where my best, I'll post on Funny or Die or whatever. But trying to remain versatile is tough. But
think as two people who started as assistants and didn't plan to start a business, I know that sounds weird, didn't set out to be entrepreneurs and weren't actors, or it was something that took me by surprise that I needed my own brand. It was hard enough to decide what the brand of the festival was going to be. And I think if anything, we are also we have the exact same job title and we did the exact same thing. So individually, I don't even know that I could say what I as an individual am as a brand, but we had to sort of own the grassroots side, that it actually mattered who we were that started this thing, and the number of publicists and press that wanted to do a story on the two of us took me by total surprise. And
You guys were on Amy Poehler's Smart Girls,
we
right?
were, yeah. And it really was, I had to own that it wasn't just the festival, it was the story behind the people that started it, and the Kickstarter story, and that it was two women who started it, and that it was grassroots and all of these things. So if anything, I didn't decide what I had to give in to everybody telling us that it mattered in a way that was nice, but I never wanted to be in front of the camera. Individual brand, I don't even know, but as a partnership, that was something I had to kind of give into, that it actually mattered.
And even just to add to that, I mean, we really had to almost play a part, almost act when we started doing meetings with studios and networks. Our first trip out there after the first festival, the last time I had been in LA, I had been an assistant. So now we're going in and having assistants ask if we want water or if we want coffee. And at first we wouldn't take it because we felt so guilty that our peers were now giving us things. We've since gotten over that. We'll take water and coffee. But it really took us a while to even brand ourselves as peers to now the executives. And we had to see ourselves that way. And then even at the festival, we spent a lot of time with how we are seen even at the festival. The first couple of years, since we had such a small team, we were the ones running around putting out fires. We were the ones that knew it inside and out. Our staff was amazing, but really at the end of the day, it had to be us. Now, 4 years going into 5 years into it, our publicist has very much made it clear to us that we need to be the host of the festival. So we spend a lot of time figuring it is very hard to let our staff, who is amazing, do their jobs and us really become more of the face and introing our screenings and panels and making sure that we are greeting our panelists and even the attendees and really sitting down and talking to them and being present with them as opposed to running around behind the scenes. And I mean, I don't know if this is being two women, but as much as it's like that even goes into what we wear and how we present ourselves during the day. And because you go to a lot of events and you see the team running around and they have walkie-talkies and they look t-shirts and it's wonderful, but they look like part of a production crew. And so we made the decision for us that we didn't want to be seen that way. I mean, have been told that we are not allowed to have walkie-talkies at the festival, which I'm very disappointed about.
I don't know that's a visual thing. I think that's what they want to hear from us.
I know. I think they don't want us to know what's happening behind the scenes. One of our staff members loves to give long stories about what went wrong after he has fixed it. Which is lovely, but sometimes I just need to know that it's fixed, not what happened. But it really has become an intentional, really, I mean, year-round, but at the festival of being the host of it. And that was a decision that we made that I don't know if all events or festivals do. A lot of times the people running it are the ones behind the scenes. And we have been, through a lot of coaxing, have really taken on knowing that so much of our growth is the personal relationships we build and how important that is. So we know that a lot of people will do things for us. I mean, they will send certain cast members or they will send certain shows because it is us asking, not necessarily the festival asking, even though we are the festival, but it really is us maintaining those relationships. But it has been a conscious choice. It had to be something that we really decided to do.
I can attest to this fact. Emily actually walked up to me one time where there was a problem with the lines for a panel, and Emily came and fixed it and talked to me directly, and that actually caused me to go home and tell people about what wonderful festival hosts the festival had.
Thank you. I didn't have like fear all over my face.
I also like what she said about owning it, because it's like, you're right, at some point, with both like me and with you guys in your positions, you know, there is a certain thing you have to do. And for me, the hard part's always like walking that line of because it's such a gray area between like self-promotion and hyping or whatever, and not, but also not being like conceited and egotistical, or being like, I'm kind of a big deal or whatever, you know. And I've known people who are like that, who, the sad part is I actually see it work a lot. Like I see people who believe these, but if you tell somebody I'm a pretty big deal, they'll be like, he's a pretty big deal, man. He told me he's a pretty big deal.
I'm going to answer this question, I guess, a little bit differently in two parts. So the first part is almost a call to action, but a realization that if you're on social media today, you have a Facebook account and you post a status, that status and the content that you're creating is going to say something about who you are. And so right now we're in a shift because people are basically, everyone is a brand if you have a social account, because you're creating content, you're promoting it, and you're distributing it. And that content has a huge ramifications on how people perceive and who you are. So the type of content you're posting out, hopefully it's hopefully I got some good content up there, nothing too embarrassing. But so you could just do a Google search here, and so there's all this content that I personally have put out there. That says something about who I am, and that's publicly accessible now. So now I am my own brand, and that's true of everyone. So I would say, like, even on your fan page, like the type of content, if you don't want to pinhole yourself, I wouldn't be posting a lot of funny stuff related on there. Maybe if you want to appeal to growing your audience to a more loyal audience as a comedian, you are developing that content. But that's why when people say content's king, is because of the influence that it has. The second part is how have I personally branded myself. I live in the world of LinkedIn because that's where my customers are at. All of my decision makers from an advertiser standpoint, because we work with primarily advertisers and brands, they're all on LinkedIn if they're like a social media decision maker, and they're looking at like basically my profile page, and then that's usually the first gateway into how you understand what NAC is, through me at least. And so the types of content and even where I position that content on the page and what types of content I forego. For instance, I don't have a summary on my page. I've done that intentionally. Creates a type of experience that I've crafted, and I do that with intention to ultimately maximize whatever objective I'm after. In this case, I want people to look at my profile and see that I'm a credible marketer, and then hopefully check out my startup and buy my service, because that's the type of brand I'm trying to create. And then as well as also what I'm using, because I do a lot of Snapchat marketing, and there's a lot of, if Snapchat's kind of really new and people are kind of like, okay, what is that? So if I'm positioning myself as like a Snapchat user and I'm using that and I'm saying, hey, add me on Snapchat, you now know that I use Snapchat. So when I say I'm a Snapchat marketer, it's like, well, this guy actually uses Snapchat. He's on this platform. I've created like an idea in your head as a result of just using a platform. So everything from, it's all in contents to what you're using, what you're posting, what you're saying.
I suppose the way I've branded myself depends heavily on context. The retreating Marxist inside me just really hates the idea of self-commodification. I think it's repugnant and alienates yourself from yourself. You end up being this mask with no actor behind it, and I think it hollows you out. But that's the idealist in me. And that particular phrasing that I just pitched to you, is that not a self-positioning? Is that not a brand? So I had to let it go. All right, capitalists, God. You got me on a technicality. So I think if I'm talking to people interested in Tuva, people who are going to go do something like take a trip to Tuva, they're going on an adventure of a lifetime, all right? And typically people who can afford to do something like this have more money, they're typically more educated, they're typically more interested already in issues related to culture, history, economics, etc. So the way that I've filled in the content on the webpage is written in kind of an ethnographic travel log style. So when people come to the webpage and start reading the content, they're learning about me as one of the directors of the program, et cetera, they're becoming ethnographers in their own right? Like they're being brought into this cultural world. They're doing the work of a historian or an ethnographer. So I've got to brand myself in a way that the people who go on these tours think about themselves. Who do they want to be? Because by taking this trip, in a sense, me and the clients who come along to Tuva are sharing something that's, again, kind of once in a lifetime. And that identifies them with me. And I'm not saying the people who want to go to Tuva want to be me, but it helps to reflect their values, should I say. So in the way that I speak about Travel Tuva, the way that I put the marketing pieces together, I kept in mind, again, very much what the people who want to go do something like this want. What are their background drives? How do they conceive of themselves? And in that way, you're able to grab sometimes conscious and sometimes unconscious buy-in into the story of Travel Tuva. And all that sounds like horrifically manipulative, but unfortunately, I think that's just part of the nature of what it means to be a human being, interacting with billions of people, all scraping for their share of the pie.
To frame it positively, it allows
I'm
you.
sorry about that, but it's true.
It allows you
it's
to.
true.
No, it allows you to make connections with people and to relate to people.
No, that's most definitely true, and it's a way of sharing value. And again, the cynic in me sees this as a very, very negative thing, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, it can also be about establishing relations. And, I've gone on trips with people to Tuva, and we look back on it, and it's something we actually did share. And I guess the exchange of money is something that trips me up occasionally. And I'm just wearing my heart on my sleeve for y'all. When I work at the state of Texas, that's a whole other game, right? And part of doing anthropology in Tuva really showed me the ways in which people, again, maybe unconsciously, market themselves as part of a social group, fix themselves within social hierarchies, relate themselves within familial hierarchies, etc., all by displaying those positionings through outward sign and symbol, right? How do I dress? What does that mean to the people around me? How does that position me relative to them? Working in the state, I had to kind of dress up a little more than I was used to as an impoverished graduate student. And interestingly, people call me sir now and open doors and like literally reduce the amount of work I have to do in the day because they perceive me as someone who's doing something that maybe benefits society, And I think you've got to be very, very, very conscious of that. I bought a watch. See, I keep track of time. I've got a ring that has money on it. It's actually an old $50. So also when working in the state, I like to brand myself as a Texan, and part of this is like sentimental, and I'm fifth generation Texas. I grew up hunting, fishing. My family is blessed to own some land in West Texas. I learned how to make Czech sausage from my grandfather as we killed deer in West Texas and used our Czech immigrant recipe from my great-great-grandfather to make it, and I still do that today with my brother every year. Those stories, again, this isn't cynical, that informs the way that I behave as a state representative. And I go out to communities and I ask them to tell me their histories as a state historian. We can relate in ways that I don't think anybody else operating in my capacity could because they're not from here. In the same way that when I went to Tuva and tried to get into Tuvan communities, my genuine interest in their music, I think, took me a long way. But anthropology has this problem of anthropologists going native. You never do. You're always at arm's length, which is part of the reason, my earlier kind of more naive views of having this global international life that seemed so exciting now seem ridiculous. You can't ever be anything than what you originally were born into. And all of these, again, strategies of positioning yourself socially that go on unconsciously for very many people, I think are unavoidable and actually pretty elegant way of organizing and channeling our labor. So I try to keep those issues in mind when I think about how I dress, how I speak to people, how I present myself. Go Texas.
We're actually going to use this as a transition point. I'm going to show a video that will give you a frame of reference for the next question that we're going to ask. And this is some of Elliot's documentary work. Should be on help. It is. We turned it up all the way earlier. Yeah. Our media technician, Blake Powers. While we are working on this, perhaps Emily might talk to us. We talked about branding ourselves. Perhaps you might talk to us a little bit about branding your festival and giving it the past and present and future.
Absolutely. I mean, we always knew we wanted the festival to be a celebration of the entire television medium, which is very expansive, but we knew we wanted it to be past, current, and the future of TV. And so really in our logo, as we saw, and all of our style, we wanted to keep it pretty simple because the diversification of the brand is really in the programming. We program across all genres. We are very cognizant of making sure it's comedy and it's drama. And although we believe you can't say what a person's show is, that some that tend to be more male-centric versus female-centric versus teen versus horror or suspense, that we really wanted an array of all of them, which is a big balancing act, but that really is what kind of keeps the brand diversified, is making sure that we cover the whole spectrum of television and not just pigeonhole ourselves into a subgenre.
One of my favorite things about the festival is it has new programming as well, but it's also got canceled too soon. One of my personal favorites. Yes. That's wonderful. How's it going? This may be a bust. You may need to describe this scene, Elliot.
That would be really, really sad because this is quite a cool story.
But I just want to add to that point because I think that's a good point. Is before they went in to create a branding for this festival, they first started at what type of message they wanted to convey. And I think whenever we talk about personal branding, your success in today's world is almost, I don't want to say dependent on how well you can personal brand, but it will determine your success. But is a really well factor in your determination of how successful you're going to be. And part of that is having a predetermined. It helps to understand what type of branding what message you want to actually convey. And it's a good way to actually develop a personal brand for yourself is adapt that branding, like you said. When you're at the Capitol, you may act differently versus where you're doing the more travel-based stuff. And so that comes down to how you're going to tailor your resume for that job, and how you're going to present yourself there, and what types of accolades you're going to highlight. And that plays a huge role into personal branding. And so those are some of the things you should be kind of conscious of and whenever you're developing that.
We were also very fortunate to be able to, since we did start off so small, and Elizabeth, were you there the first year? Did you come to the second year? Okay, well, it was still very small the second year. So, but really being able to know going into it the major elements we wanted of the festival, but also be able to grow and to stand by our original vision. So knowing we wanted small rooms, we have to walk into these meetings with brands and studios and networks and explain to them why we are not Comic-Con, where there's 5,000 people in a room, but why we are just as valuable. And we couldn't really say that year one. We knew that's what we wanted, but yeah. Also true. Not really year two either. But we really knew that in our gut that is what we believed, but it's not until really now, going into year 5, that we can really say that. Because even this year, and we did a reunion for a beloved show called Gilmore Girls, and it took over the internet that we reunited 17 of these cast members and the creator and another writer. And there were still 1,200 people in the room, which is the largest room we've ever done, but it's still fairly small compared to these other conventions, but it really did explode on the internet and people took notice.
To the point that we had dinner in New York recently in a very small restaurant on the Upper West Side and talked to an advisory board member. This came up in conversation. We explained to him what happened last year, which we have a little PTSD about. And then as the waiter brings our check, he goes, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard you say Stars Hollow, which is the town in the show." And he said, "Do you have anything to do with the reboot? Because Netflix is now bringing it back." And we said, no, we did this reunion, and before I could finish my sentence, he finished it for me. Waiter on the Upper East Side, I mean, like, he didn't come, he, like, didn't look like the target audience, like, and he had heard of this thing that happened 6 months earlier, not just the Netflix reboot. So to M's point, like, 1,200 people in the room, 2,500 people at the festival, and yet this thing, I had family members in San Francisco saying, "My coworkers are talking about a reunion that you're doing. How did this happen?" So it does prove that.
I have a question. Is it working? It is.
Is that the question?
At the same time, because I'm playing off my computer.
In 1966, here in Rio Grande City, conditions were really bad. The people were working long hours, very low wages.
When I joined the strike, I was 21 years old. We used to work on the fields though, and they were paying us 25 cents an hour, 30 cents an hour, and it wasn't enough for us. We used to work all day, 8 hours for $2.40.
We had no bargaining capacity with the farmers because we had the law against us. The law didn't allow us to negotiate with farmers. So farmers took advantage of that. We picketed the fields and they refused to negotiate. So their solution was ignore them. Let's go get what we used to call at those times Mexican nationals. They would go to the bridge in Roma and they would bring in busloads of workers from Mexico and leave us pretty much out in the cold. We had nothing to bargain with. So then some of the locals decided there's a big problem them bringing workers from Mexico through the Roma Bridge. They went to the Roma Bridge. They blockaded the bridge.
By the time everybody was there on the bridge, there were 14 guys and me and the lady from California. But then they came about 8 o'clock, they came and arrested the guys. So we decided to block the bridge, me and Irene Chandler, the one from California. So we blocked the bridge and we were there since 8 o'clock until 11. I guess we were laying down right here. It was one on this side and the other one on the other side. We were almost blocking the whole bridge. So that was where they came and arrested us.
There were no laws, physical laws that they were charged with. They were just jailed and beaten and mistreated.
I know we were going to be arrested, but I was not afraid or nothing to be arrested because we were doing something for us.
They were still bringing the nationals and they were still getting all their crops out of here. So the people finally decided, we have nothing to lose. We can't make a living. We're being mistreated. We have no sanitation, nothing to lose, not even decent drinking water. So they decided, let's bring it to the national attention. So they organized what they had and they took a 400-mile trip from Rio Grande City to San Juan to get the blessings of the church. They went to Corpus, and from Corpus they headed for Austin to bring national attention and so that people could see what was happening here in South Texas.
Take about 2 months. It ended on Labor Day. When we were almost in Austin, a lot of people joined us in the march, supporting us. And there were about 10,000 people at the state capitol when we got there.
So it really affected their state of mind, knowing that individually I couldn't deal with that farmer. He would never listen to me. But now that we are a group of people, and now that we're attracting the attention of the whole nation, now they're having to start and look at us. And Washington's starting to pay attention.
I believe we win, and the people now, they're earning more than we were earning. They have portable toilet, they have cold water with ice and everything on the fields.
I think it was a pivotal point that brought the people to realize that they are empowered. As a group, they are empowered. They can do more than any individual could have done.
So we got a little meta in this video. The question that I'm actually going to ask has to do with image, and there's a very powerful image that the protesters created in laying out on that bridge. But there's also a meta power in Elliot taking some of these people to the bridge and interviewing them on the bridge where this powerful thing happened. So some of that comes through on the screen to us. Do you want to talk more about that?
So again, part of the Texas Historical Commission's charge is to protect the historic resources of our state. And we conceive of the videos that we produced, well, maybe I should say I conceive of them. I assume my team agrees. Let's just pretend this is Elliot, private person, not Elliot, Texas Historical Commission. So I conceive of the point of the mobile app is not only to educate the public about stories in Texas that are little known, that are very local, but we also want to link those stories to place, so that places that are valuable historic assets have a reason to be saved in the minds of community members, right? So the bridge connecting Miguel Alemán to Roma is a historic structure that's very beautiful, that ostensibly anyway can be framed as a historic resource for the community, maybe in terms of tourism, maybe in terms of maintaining local political cohesion, et cetera. So that the event, the bridge sit-in during the 1966 Starr County farm workers strike occurred, gives people in that community reason to want to protect the bridge if they know it's involved in this larger story. Now, if the strike only took place locally and it never amounted to anything, people in the community could decide whether or not they wanted to keep the bridge around, and whether or not the bridge served as a compelling memento for a small story that people in that community shared. But if you zoom out a little bit and realize that the 1966 farm worker strike also culminated with this march to Austin, which was organized by local members of the farm workers chapter in Starr County, but in coordination with Cesar Chavez's National Farm Workers Association in California, we see that this march and bridge sit-in had larger significance to national political issues that themselves related to international pushes for labor organizers and labor rights across the globe. So yes, the story of the farm worker strike is important and significant for the local community, and yes, the local community ultimately has the decision-making power over the bridge. But if we can tie, again, local people's understanding of that story to a broader community, the nation, the world, that significance in turn grants the local community a certain prestige internationally. This is the place where that important strike took place. This is the bridge where people sat in and tried to prevent the flow of Bracero workers coming over the bridge that ruined the South Texas economy for workers. All of a sudden that story takes on much broader meaning because it's linked again to Cesar Chavez. It's linked to the international movement for workers' rights that was going on at the time. That gives the community pride, and that pride is affixed to the bridge. Now, the reverse happens as well. If people are traveling internationally and have an interest in the history of civil rights era protests in the United States, and they find out about this video via our mobile tour app, and they watch the video and they learn the history, if they go to a place like Roma where this bridge is located and are fascinated by that history because of its, again, significance for these larger histories in which they already have an interest, they're going to spend money in that town when they go to see the bridge. They're going to show up to check out the history, to meet the people who are featured in the video, to go to the local museum where this story may be told in greater detail, and stay in a hotel, buy some gas. So in that way, keeping these fixtures around in the community, even though they may be outmoded technologically speaking, has great benefit via the economic channels that tourism provides, but also in terms of establishing community pride and cohesion. So we took Daria Vera, the woman who spoke to us about sitting in on the bridge, out onto this bridge in an effort to, again, link people's understanding of this story and its significance to the physical structure, particularly local people who may not know about this important, very important historical event, but they may see the bridge every day. They may be driving by it. And if local people see this video and learn about the strike and learn about the history and then see the bridge, following watching the video, all of a sudden they've linked the two. They've realized, oh, that's the bridge that was in the video. Oh my God, like what an incredible resource. So putting her out on the bridge physically and having her say, this is where I sat. This is where the Texas law enforcement came and physically ripped me off the bridge, beat me, and imprisoned me. All of a sudden, the story also becomes far more real. It's not just some person talking to you about abstract ideas, asking you to co-imagine them in your own mind. She's saying, this is an event that happened, here's the place where it happened. And all of a sudden, historic sites like the bridge connecting Alamán to Roma become enchanted in a way. And I think that's part of the power of historic sites and the interpretation that anthropologists, historians, and other people who work in heritage preservation provide for the public. It's a moment to go to a place in time, and you're not really transported in a sense, but we create hallowed ground, if that makes it more clear. The effect of what?
We're also seeing this power of recreation in the art world as well. You'll see you'll see photographers that are recreating some photo from someone's childhood, et cetera, et cetera. So from an artistic perspective, do you have anything to add to that, Heath? The power of image.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously, being a huge film, television fan, I could go on for hours about images that impacted me, and not even in various different ways too, because there's the more visceral, things like he's talking about. We're talking about real people and real experiences, or like the one that comes to my mind is I'm being a huge Beatles fan. Of course, when John Lennon was assassinated, Yoko Ono at one point, she still has his glasses that like have some of his blood on the glasses, and they're shattered from where he fell. And she used those glasses like in an ad campaign. And I love what she did. She took it and turned it around into something positive, because all these images she was putting out there were promoting love and peace, with this kind of potentially horrific image. And so it's a reminder of like what he believed in and all that. So there's that kind of powerful image, and that like, ooh, that's very visceral, and the kind of stuff you're doing. But then I also feel like there's a different category, which I hesitate to discount it as not as weighty, but that is how it kind of feels in my mind, because it's more entertainment value. But like, I even think of things like, as a huge Star Wars fan, when I went to see the prequels when they were released, which now are, of course, much maligned, and probably rightly so. But at that moment in time, when I'm in the theater and that 20th Century Fox logo comes up, and I'm just immediately like, my body had a visceral reaction. It transported me back in time to, 1977. And that crawl that Star Wars has in the beginning, and things like that, these movies and music and all kinds of art, it can have a very visceral, real, physical effect on you, and like transport you to a whole nother time. Even there's the nostalgia factor, like, transporting you back to when I was a kid and saw Star Wars, or even if it's not relating to something from your past, like a nostalgia thing. That's one of the things, I think one of the reasons I got into film and television is, when my girlfriend and I went and saw Birdman recently, it was just such an original film in the way, and everything about it, and the way it was shot, and the way it was written in the story, and the way it was acted, and the way they incorporated the score, and that when it was done, we both walked out of that theater and just kind of looked at each other and kind of like knew that we'd both just been really affected by what we saw, but we're like almost speechless. We're just like, what? That was awesome, right? Like, that was awesome. And I think that's why I got into acting, is because a lot of people like to discount art. I hear especially a lot of actors, and I've done this too, who will say things like, oh, we get paid to play pretend for a living. What we do is not really important. We're not, doctors. We're not firefighters. We're not out there saving lives. We're being goofy, and we're not important. And I don't think that's true. I think that entertainment and the power of imagery, and the power of film and television, everything is very important. There's a reason that there have been plays and art for as long as there's been recorded history, because it's something that people need that to for all kinds of reasons. One, to escape from maybe things in life that are hard, or the violence and horrific things, or just to be taken away to some fantastic place that doesn't exist. I remember when I read the book of the Lord of the Rings, the whole trilogy of Lord of the Rings books, when I closed that book, I felt like I had been on that journey with them. It wasn't just like, oh, that was a really good book, and it was very evocative. And so, I was like, I was there. I just went on this huge, fantastical journey through this detailed land with detailed histories and peoples, and so yeah. I think it's something that is very important to us as people, and that, like I said, gets discounted. I think unrightly so, because it's hard. It is hard to compare that to, soldiers who fight for us or surgeons who save our lives or everything. But I think it's equally important in its own way.
It's hugely important. Yeah, we do need that. But we also, and the reason for this event is that because there's such an influx of art and non-art coming at us every day, now more than ever, we need to be able to be conscious consumers of art and beyond. Yeah. Is it brief?
Oh, well, I was just going to add quickly, too, it's part of storytelling. We are such a storytelling society and have been since the beginning of time. And even the documentary, you're telling the story and adding these beautiful visuals to it. And it's what we're doing with social media and television. That's how we communicate, is through storytelling. And it is very important. That's all.
We have time for one or maybe a few, if our answers are quick, audience questions. If Haley Harden is here, I will give you priority. She asked a question on Facebook. Do you want to ask the question for us, or do you want me to? Okay.
I just want to know specifically how this affects millennials, both in the workplace and out of the workplace.
What do you mean by this?
Just like the communicating our message specifically, social media and in person.
I have a hard time with the lack of sensitivity to variation of individuals generally, and I think that's maybe an artifact of anthropological training. We tend to focus on individuals. But when somebody says something to me in, say, the tourism sphere where I work, that, well, millennials travel differently. It's like, well, come on. Millennials are an age range, but what is their class? How much money do they have at their disposal? What happened to them in childhood that formed a certain interest that they are now pursuing, or whatever it may be? Are they male or female? Are they what is the cultural situation for them ethnically within their country? How are they treated given they're part of a certain ethnic group? These are all questions that I think get you far more compelling answers than trying to lump everybody together by age. Yes, I was born at a certain time, but what does that mean in terms of what kinds of materials I've already had access to in the world, whether it be by way of fate or just by way of, again, social positioning? Those are all questions that I think end up providing much more nuanced understandings of individuals that we're trying to market to. So I don't really think about age. I think about age. Age is important, most definitely, but I don't let that be the only criteria by way of which I create a message.
Did you want to add?
No, I agree.
Okay. Probably time for one more question. Anybody have a question? Yeah?
All you guys spend so much time in today's media. Like 100 years down the road, all we're going to have is today's media. And what do you feel like the modern American identity is based on the media that we provide?
So is the question regarding how media is changing, or how media now will change our American identity?
It's going to be viewed based off of what's being put out there right now. Yeah. media later.
Basically, how we think the future will view this time in media. I mean, I think it's very much revolves around social media. I mean, it's what we talk about the most. It is branding ourselves, and everyone is now their own brand. And I really, who knows what is down the line, but with everyone having a Facebook and Twitter and Instagram account and Snapchat and many other things that I don't know what it will evolve to, but I do think that people will look back and see such this hub of social media and really view as everyone basically trying to have their own voice in this world.
Yeah, this kind of sparks something that hopefully is related, at least this is in my mind, because I've been talking to me about how I'm really sick of people equating this age and being like, oh man, we're all just a bunch of zombies who just walk around looking at our phones all the time and things aren't as good as they used to be. And I'm like, I don't agree with that at all. And then, like, people have brought up the examples of, like, look at old pictures and everybody's on a train reading a paper. And I feel like with everything, there's pros and there's cons. That's always the case with everything, including where we are now in media, with social media. But I am a huge social media proponent. I love it. I love where we are. I love technology. I love my phone. I love my Facebook. Because, like, I have so many relationships that I would not have if it weren't for social media. Because I remember, I'm old enough to, I lived before social media, and it's like, you only have so much time in your day to, like, call people and go out and meet people at the bar and hang out. And I'm not saying social media should be a substitute for that, obviously, which I understand that argument. It should not replace actual interaction between people or anything, but it allows me to stay in touch with so many people as we're able to, and have ongoing conversations with people I would never have conversations with as we're able to. I post something, and then a couple hours from now you post a comment, and a couple hours now she posts a comment, and over the next couple of days we've had this amazing conversation. And there's people who I still feel like I'm friends with, and I know because we are in touch on social media. And they go like, oh man, hey, I saw you're in New York from all your posts in New York, and they know what's going on. I'm like, yeah, it was really great. We talk about shows. And so I think it's a great thing. And I just think that, we're in that growing pains thing, but I think, yeah, hopefully you'll see it as the days when that was birthed.
Well, I think, every generation has said it's not like it used to be. That's and they'll keep saying that. But in terms of what media we have, what is seen now, I think still the major stuff is what's going to stick out. Like, everybody is making content, but in 100 years, I don't know that they'll see my personal Facebook feed content, but still the major films and movies and books, like, it's still going to be a popularity to a certain extent that lasts, or it's going to be cultural anthropology that goes and finds some sort of hidden gem and takes those stories from 100 years ago. That's why we have them now, or we still watch I Love Lucy because it was really popular. I think I would hope people 100 years from now still watch I Love Lucy. I think we're getting better at keeping our history, but still the major Shondaland, Scandal, Grey's Anatomy shows are what they'll see in 100 years more than the web series that only existed on YouTube.
Yeah, and I'm going to just chime in and just leave with the lasting point is, like, I think right now things are a little artificial with the first 10 years of social. But I think one of the things I've noticed as a trend is growing in authenticity. So I think what's going to happen is, as things move on, our content that we create and how we perceive ourselves online will be much more authentic. And we'll look back in the first 10 years of social and be a little bit surprised that people tried to create a persona for themselves that necessarily wasn't like what the actual truth was.
I like that.
I'm sure you probably encounter this a lot, is when people say, like, hey man, I need you to help me make a viral video. It's like, you can't do that. You can try to maximize it, but you can't make a viral video. Like, well, if we do this, it'll go viral.
And I think that's the growth in why you've seen, like, it took Facebook 4 years to get 50 million users, or 3.5. It took Snapchat 4 years to get 100 million users, and I think the reason why is Snapchat's much more real, authentic platform and presenting content in that way. We've already seen new social platforms spring up that's presenting content in a way that it has to be authentic and how it's actually created